I'm really tracking a communication in my system that feels spacious and almost like it's not trying to argue me into a particular path. It's like I'm kind of sitting back and there's like a certain knowing or communication that's arising.
Cory Muscara is a former monk and current author and teacher whose meditations have been listened to over 25 million times across 150 countries in the world. He's also taught mindful leadership at Columbia University and is an instructor of positive psychology at the University of Pennsylvania. In this conversation, we explore how to return to your true nature and access the wisdom that's already within you. You'll learn practical tools for distinguishing between fear-based and soul-based decisions, why letting go requires moving closer first, and how to build trust in your inner knowing through small daily choices.
One of the telltale signs of the ego or conditioning is that like it's pretty noisy. It can be a little constrictive. It plays in the realm of fear, of anxiety, of control.
But accessing this inner wisdom requires navigating a challenging paradox.
The paradox of letting go is once I started doing more letting go work, I realized that there is a semantic paradox to letting go because it implies that you need to move away from something, but you often first need to move closer to the thing that you want to move away from to be able to see what are the subconscious hooks in it.
Cory shares how his time as a monk taught him to distinguish between actions driven from fear versus those aligned with our deeper truth.
Something's going to be motivating your actions, and that's the thing to look at. What is motivating my moment-to-moment way of relating with the world? That's where I see the intersection between spirituality and living in the real world.
He also reveals a simple but powerful practice for making better decisions by accessing your inner compass.
What communicates a yes to you? What communicates a no to you? What communicates an I don't know? If you can get those three categories down, then you use that as a compass for other things.
Before we get into this conversation, I want to ask you to join this amazing community of consciousness explorers. This whole idea of pursuing expanded consciousness and the boundaries of human potential while living a modern life is relatively new, which is why we interview revered masters, teachers, experts, and practitioners to help you on your own journey. To stay up to date on the latest conversations, simply click subscribe below and you'll be notified each time a new episode comes out. I am so grateful for all of your support and comments. I love reading them. Now let's dive into this conversation. Cory, what's up, man?
Hey, Scott. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you here, man. And I was having so much fun preparing for this episode, just revisiting a lot of your Instagram content that has been a source of wisdom and inspiration for me. And I thought we could crack this one open by reading one of the learnings that you had from a post. I guess it was from a time that you spent with a monk. And the quote is, "Finding your true self is an act of love. Expressing it is an act of rebellion." And I was very curious to learn more about that, particularly the rebellion part. And maybe we jump off from here.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I think the first part of that is pretty intuitive for people. This idea of taking the journey of connecting to who you are beyond culture's ideas about who you are and beyond the ideas that you've adopted over the course of your life about what you need to do, how you need to behave, how you need to feel, what you need to think in order to get safety, love, and praise. So we all have an accumulation of that. And it kind of just becomes this dense fog that we live within, that the experience of it is like, that's me. But on a deeper level, we can feel like, yeah, there's something off about that. Or I feel exhausted playing out those patterns, or it's leading me down paths that aren't really fulfilling. So the act of love is the unwinding of that process and coming back to a core you, your true nature. And when you're there, there's like a fundamental experience of this is me. And it's beautiful and it's fulfilling and it's rich. And everyone I've ever helped get to that place, and my whole journey of anchoring more and more into that place, it's a reward unto itself. So that's the act of love. The rebellion, it's a strong word choice. A lot of people didn't love
Provocative.
that word choice. Yeah, it's provocative. The rebellion is that there's not always space in the world, or not always acceptance in the world for you to be uh, the expression of you, the unique expression of you, whether that's in your family of origin, your community, the world at large. And so the reason we often become kind of like a bent over version of ourselves, like distorted and blocked, suppressed, is because of all the ways that we learned it wasn't okay to be us. Usually that starts at a very early age. We have experiences where we're just being me, expressing me, feeling, and then we're told like, hey, stop crying, or why are you doing that, or why are you walking that way, or why are you talking like that? Whatever it might be. There's like endless examples that we all have that usually become like core memories. But it's our first learnings of, oh, maybe it's not okay for me to just be in this free expression of myself. And so then we start talking a little differently, thinking about ourselves differently, kind of berating ourselves into not doing that thing that might not make other people like us. And it's not without merit, right? Part of being human is living among other humans. And so if your like natural expression is like maybe a little uh misattuned, like there is a form of um having to assess who's around you and how to be in relationship to them in a way that their needs are met and your needs are met. So we're always navigating that tension. But a lot of these things live as like very core subconscious ideas of it's not okay to be me. And so the rebellion is like, yeah, when you start stepping into yourself, you're going to feel often like in your immediate surroundings, the people that you've built your life around, they might not like it. If you've built your life on the ground of being a people pleaser, you'll notice some pushback to when you start putting up boundaries, because a lot of the relationships you've established have been established on the ground of you being a people pleaser. So there's lots of things that come up where it almost can feel like me being me is a form of rebellion against all the forces that are telling me not to be who I am. And it doesn't have to feel like a form of rebellion. There's a lot of different ways you can orient to it. Um, but that's what that quote is pointing to. And I think it resonated also with a lot of people because they could feel like that it sometimes can feel like a war coming back to yourself and embodying your right to be yourself in a world that's just hammering us with expectations and ideas of what we should be.
I definitely feel that there was such a transformational conflict in all areas of my life when I received the call, if you will, to come back. And you know what's really interesting is the tension that those experiences created were really the gateways to understanding those patterns
Mm.
and and to kick off the unwinding process. And what I was curious to understand for you is, you know, was there a particular inflection point or moment when you went from this adding more, being better, trying harder, doing it more right, to this more kind of unwinding pathway of finding joy and happiness and wholeness?
Yeah. I think the maturing perspective of like my personal and spiritual growth being a process of unwinding patterns rather than adding new, better ones was a cumulative process over years. Whereas I think for other people, maybe yourself included, you're kind of like going through life and then you just get hit and then it like forces this unwinding back into yourself. I was uh, doing a lot of different things from meditation and then exploring psychology and trauma work and just all different forms of personal growth, kind of trying to piece together these ideas of like, what does it mean to live a good life? What does it mean to be fulfilled? But I started on a good foundation, I thought, which was through contemplative practice, specifically Vipassana meditation. And so that the quote referencing that time that I spent with that monk, that was a 6-month silent retreat back in 2012. And that whole period, that's just, you wake up at 3 a.m., you go to bed around 10 p.m., and you have to do 14 hours of meditation each day, sitting meditation, walking meditation, sitting, walking, back and forth. 2 small meals, no reading, writing, listening to music, no speaking, no contact with the outside world. And so in that experience, you're really not adding much to your experience at all. You're not trying to become a better version of yourself. You're not trying to even like think more positive thoughts. You're just sitting and being with the experience that's arising and letting it move through with awareness. And you're paying attention to it in a particular way, but you're not doing much with it. And yet, like, when you come out of an experience like that, and when I came out of that experience, I felt like a very different person. I still had my personality quirks and still had a sense of humor, but there were ways of relating and ways of thinking and ways of feeling that kind of just fell away. I no longer had an inner critic. I felt like my own best friend. And I wasn't adding anything to my experience to get there. I wasn't optimizing my routine or trying to like will myself into a perfectly crafted version of myself. I was just like being and allowing like all these different thoughts and emotions and pains to arise and surface, but holding them in loving awareness and letting like the fuel and the energy that was keeping them bound in my system and the fear and the self-hate, like all of that just arise and pass. And through that experience, like layer by layer, things burn off. Things that are held together by fear, like they burn off in the warmth of love and compassion. And in that way, you get this unwinding experience that we're referencing, where you slowly, it has like a gravitational pull, like wants to pull you back down into like the core your true nature. It takes energy to live a performative version of yourself. All these ideas of who you have to be and what you need to do, like that, it's driven by fear, and it takes energy to keep that up, to be the people pleaser, to work really hard so people think I'm good enough. Right? It's a huge difference between working hard because you're connected to self and it's just like a natural energy that wants to explore and create, versus working hard because you have this 5-year-old idea of yourself who needs to get straight A's in order to make dad proud or mom proud, and that's still running the show. So for me, like that experience was really illuminating of just like how much I come back to myself. And then it's not like I'm in a pile of nothingness when I come back from the monastery and I don't want to do anything anymore because I just want to meditate and now I'm enlightened and whatever. It's like, no, there was a ton of energy, but the energy was like clearer. I had a better sense of who I was. I had a better sense of what I wanted to do in the world. I was less obstructed with ideas of I can't do that or I'm an imposter. So, yeah, I think personal growth, a lot of the narratives these days are about like adding better routines, thinking better thoughts, creating better habits. And they're not without merit. But if you're doing that on the foundation of an ego that is caked in ideas already about who you need to be in order to get safety, praise, and love, you're just like adding another layer on top of that. So now you're like a more perfected ego, but still haven't done anything to address like what's underneath that's motivating you to want to change in the first place. So this is where you get systems that end up like very noisy and very dense, and they're not actually able to relax into themselves, because if they did, they'd have to unwind through a lot of uncomfortable stuff and patterns of fear and all the thoughts of like, it's not okay to be still because and I'm not doing something and then I'm not worthy. Like you got to go through all of that to get to a place of just being you again. And then from there, right, like then you can build your life on a foundation of wholeness rather than deficit.
Yeah, it's funny. I just came from a walk with a venture capitalist right before this conversation, and I would say there are more curious about all this stuff, but less, I guess, less invested in it at this point in their life. And we were just talking about like how this impacts entrepreneurships. And the immediate reaction is, well, aren't you nervous that you would just be interested in doing your spiritual stuff all day versus creating and working on things? And so many of these societal narratives that we have around that view this stuff in a polarized way are so fascinating to me. And I think it's because we didn't really have as much of an archetype of a householder in the stuff that came to the US versus like stories of Ramana Maharshi and Ram Dass and all these people that lived kind of more renunciate or professional spiritual people lives. And so I think it's a really exciting time for people out there to be doing stuff in the world and also deeply exploring themselves so that we can kind of move away from this polarized narrative about really, really committing to this stuff.
Yeah. No, I mean, the archetype of the householder, I imagine you're referencing kind of like in certain Buddhist or Hindu traditions that you have like the renunciates, the monastics, and then you have the householder who's doing their spiritual practice in day-to-day life. Is that what you're referring
That's
to with
right.
that?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And I think it does set up uh this dichotomy in the mind between like spiritual life on the hilltop or in the retreat center in the monastery with the shaved head, wearing robes, and then like being the venture
Which you've done,
capitalist.
by the way,
Yeah,
which
I've
you've
done.
done, but you're also an entrepreneur now. Right.
Yeah,
And so I
correct.
feel like you can credibly talk about this. And I'm sharing this mostly for the people that are listening that these things, not only can they coexist, they can exist harmoniously.
Yeah, yeah. And what I will say as well is that there are, I think there are many people who live a more sheltered spiritual life that really don't get to explore dimensions of their humanness because of it. And their awakening, I would argue, is often incomplete, or it
Mm.
exists within parameters that don't trigger too many things. Meaning like I hit profound levels of peace and bliss and contentment while I was in the monastery. I could sit for hours at a time with mosquitoes biting me in 108-degree heat, pain in my body, sweating, no air conditioning, and it's just like pure bliss. Um, and then like I came home, and a few days after that, I was 23 at the time. I was at home, and sitting at the dinner table with my dad, and he just said something along the lines of like, "All right, well, now that you're not in Monkland anymore, it's time to get a job like the rest of us." It just like hit some like 13-year-old version of Cory that was just like, "Fuck you, Dad! Don't tell me what to do," even after all the monk stuff. So it's one thing to like explore your spirituality in certain conditions that are really not activating, and it's another thing to do it in the world and to explore doing it like really in duality, where you need to make money, you need to have an identity, you're exploring relationships and intimate partnerships, which is going to bring up all your shit. And my time when I first came back from that from the monastery in 2013, there were a number of years, like 5 years, where I really struggled with how to integrate my like this interest in personal and spiritual growth with like being in the real world and needing to make money and needing to advertise and market myself. Oh my gosh, that was like so hard, creating ads. Like I just had all of this tension of like this isn't pure. um and it really like, yeah, business, running my own business, the journey of entrepreneurship was a beautiful way to integrate my path, my spiritual path, and just see all the blocks. What are all the internal blocks that I have to my full expression? Where are all the ways that I get insecure? Where are all the ways, like, just what are these deep-seated ideas that, like, you shouldn't make money or you shouldn't want to make money? Where is that? Like, where does that exist? And then seeing where there might be some merit to that. Just like, okay, yeah, like if you're obsessed with this, if it has a certain energy behind it, that's probably something to look at. But is there something fundamentally off? Like, what if that's coming from a natural place of, or it's an extension of like that creative energy? Is that creative energy fundamentally off? No, I can think of that when I was like a very small child, just like wanted to explore, wanted to build. So it took a lot of time to see like what was conditioning, like what were these things that I was doing in order to try to be liked or try to be safe
Mm.
or to try to please someone. And then what were the things that were really innate to me? And the journey of entrepreneurship, like related to that. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs resonate with this. A
Especially
lot of
ones that
us,
are on this dual exploration.
yeah, right. That like at an early age, you could probably feel the entrepreneur archetype in you. Just the part that kind of like wanted to push boundaries, wanted to do things in a unique way, maybe had a little hustler energy in you. I was like doing garage sales when I was 5 years old. And then my mom would take me to the grocery store and I'd uh, like take $1 worth of quarters and I'd buy these little figurines and then I'd flip them the next day to my classmates to make like $1 off of those. And that it wasn't impure. It wasn't ego. It was just like I was exploring that energy, and the way that energy expressed was through this duality. And in that case, it was just like my classmates um and these these little things that I would sell to them. So uh, like the idea again of like spirituality on a mountaintop, okay, yeah, that can be one version of it, but like what does it then look like when you're in the world and like you're going to be in partnership and you're going to be working a job? It's now like, how does that free flowing energy express here? And uh there was one story that Joseph Goldstein, who's a Western meditation teacher, Dharma teacher, said that shared about his time with this teacher in India that like was so helpful for me in this. His teacher was Manindraji, and he talked about how every once in a while they would leave the monastery and go down to the bazaar and do some shopping. And his teacher was always saying, like, just keep things simple, keep things simple, keep things simple. And he looked over and he saw his teacher like haggling with one of the merchants and was like, "No, I want this for 5 cents, not 10 cents. Wait, you're ripping me off." Just like really going at it, this like high end spiritual teacher. And so Joseph was just like, "Oh my gosh, should I bring this up?" Like I almost like I don't want to out him, but eventually he talked to him and he said like, "I saw you doing this. Like, what was that about? You've always said like keep things simple, keep things simple." He said, in response, "Yes, like I've been saying keep things simple, but I didn't say like be a simpleton." And what that was pointing to was that like in this particular context, this was the thing to do. This was the appropriate response. And that was his definition of mindfulness, like an appropriate response to the present moment. And so to be like a simpleton in that moment, to use that word, would be to kind of like disconnect yourself from the reality and the demands of that reality. But in that particular matrix, like that's what you're playing out. You're trying to get the best deal on the beans, and like so there's like another layer of imprisoning that we put ourselves in when we're like in a certain reality, but then we go like, I shouldn't be engaging in
Mm.
this because I'm supposed to be spiritual now. And that's the biggest one that I think people who are budding in this work get caught in, all these ideas of what it means to be spiritual. I shouldn't want money. I shouldn't care deeply about partnership. I shouldn't want connection, whatever it is. Like I should be able to just be fully content sitting in the closet meditating all day long. And it's like a nice aspiration, but you want to check those things. And also the reality that certain patterns like need to play out and exhaust themselves in the real world. When I was working with one of my teachers early on, when I was like 24, and I was really trying to figure out this thing about like making money, like the part of me that just like needed to make money and wanted to make money and had this shame around wanting to make money. She would, I never like had an aspiration to be a billionaire at all, but she would say like, if you want to be a billionaire, like just go be a billionaire. It's like you might need to just actually play out that pattern to see that it's not the thing that will bring full happiness. Maybe it will bring you happiness, but in this case, just the reality is that there are certain patterns that are keeping us bound to uh, ideas of what's going to bring us fulfillment. And a lot of people, when they come to this work, try to override that process by thinking like I shouldn't have that desire in the first place. And so now you have this desire that's sitting here, and then a performed idea of who you should be up here, but it's not clean. This is where you get a ton of projection on other people. When you see them angry or when you see them making a lot of money, like you start judging them more. That's because you haven't made peace with the part of you internally. And yeah, you can work with those patterns in your meditation practice and in stillness, but a lot of those patterns just need to be worked out in life. Like it's like, all right, this is here. I don't know why it's here. It wants to express. So I'm going to give it permission to express and hopefully not hurt too many people in the process. And I think I've given myself a lot more space now in what that looks like in my day-to-day life, and trusting that, yeah, if there's something here that like really wants, like keeping on this theme, just wants to explore money, like there's a lot of energy around that, then great, like I'll let myself explore that. And then um at worst, like I see that that wasn't the answer, or like maybe it is, and then but at best, like I worked that out, and now it naturally loses its steam and motivating force, and now like I have a more complete internal reorganization of an understanding of what a certain kind of fulfillment is, or freedom is.
I hope you're enjoying this conversation so far. If you like what you hear, let me know by clicking like, subscribing to the channel, and responding with a comment around something that you found interesting in the conversation so far. In addition to these videos, I do a lot of writing on the exploration of consciousness and my own personal revelations in my newsletter called Consciousness: The Doorway to Human Evolution. To receive these updates and more, all you need to do is simply head to the link in the description below, and you'll be added to the community of 20,000 plus consciousness explorers receiving weekly ideas and inspiration in their inbox. I look forward to hearing from you there. Now let's get back to the show. What is your personal process for trying to assess the context of some of these kind of like inner sources of energy or urges or curiosities?
Can you say more on that question?
Yeah, so like let's just use money as an example. And so you start to notice like, wow, I really want to make a lot of money, I think. And then you've consumed all these spiritual ideas about whether that's good or bad, and you have your own unique cocktail of conditioning. And it sounds like you have some sort of methodology to examine that, before just like unconsciously being like, all right, money time. And I was just curious kind of what that looks like.
For me, I'm really tracking a communication in my system that feels like spacious, and almost like it's not trying to argue me into a particular path. It's like I'm kind of sitting back, and there's like a certain knowing or communication that's arising. One of the telltale signs of the ego or conditioning is that like it's pretty noisy. It can be a little constrictive. It plays in the realm of fear, of anxiety, of control. It plays also in the realm of like lust, or like a certain really agitated excitement. So I'm paying attention to when those things arise that could, as like, okay, maybe that's triggering something that's like trauma related or pain related or fear related. and I'm listening for like, what's that quiet, spacious voice? Where is that pulling me next? And that's where I'll often say, like, desires that arise in agitation are more aligned with the ego, and desires that arise in stillness are more aligned with the soul. I use that to really guide uh, the directions that I go in my life, like the decision to marry my wife, decisions to make pivots in my business, listening to like what I want to teach right now and the format that I want to teach it in. And it's not always me just sitting still and going, okay, Cory, what is the next step of life? It's actually rarely like that. I'm just like in my life, and I'm catching myself when I usually have a decision point when it's like, what do I want to do next? Or I feel like I'm engaged in something, or I'm teaching a topic that I just feel a little bit of a rub with. It's just like, I don't have too much energy for this. Anytime I don't feel like there's a lot of energy for something, I usually take that as a moment to pause. And then I meet those moments and like I check in, just like, okay, this doesn't feel it. What is it? I don't really know. Okay, great. So that means you're in the waiting room for a period of time. And the waiting room is simply, um, I don't know what to do next, but I'm not going to do something that is overriding this place in me. I'm not going to do something out of other people's ideas of what I should do. So that's a really sacred place. Some people are in that for years at a time, especially if you're unwinding a lot of stuff. And people view the waiting room, this like non-doing, as being complacent, being lazy. And it looks like that from the outside. But if you're in it, it's the furthest thing from it. Like the amount of strength and fortitude it takes to stay in that process and not give in to all the ego's ideas of what you should do, and all the opportunities that you should take up that like seem really good and shiny, but you can feel they just have that same emptiness that all the other ones had. It takes a lot to stay with that process and not give in and follow a more subtle thread in your experience. So, but once you do that process, like once you like really go through that in a fairly significant way, you get more attuned to, like, in a way that's like oil and water, to what when you're doing something out of control, fear, anxiety, and when you're doing something from this deeper place. And for people starting out, it's not that clear. It's not oil and water. It's like mountain valley water and tap water. It's like hard to tell the difference. But there's probably something different in there. And so that's where you just like, you stay, you trust the part of you that's going, I've been doing this particular pattern for X amount of years. I could probably keep doing it, but there's something telling me that it's not giving me everything I want. And I don't know what's next, but I know it's not that. And that's where I'm going to wait, and I'm going to listen until there's clarity. And you do that with small little experiments. You wake up, do I want coffee or tea this morning? Coffee. How do I know? Just like, okay, well, I don't really know. It just said coffee. Okay, well, pause a little bit more and go a little deeper. Like what communicates a yes to you? What communicates a no to you? What communicates an I don't know? If you don't know, take the things that you absolutely know are yeses in your life. Do I love my dog? Yes. Okay, that was clear. How did you know that? How did that yes present itself? Cool. Do you hate war? It's like, yeah. Okay. Well, how did you know that? And then you do that with something that's an I don't know. Like, what should I do next in my life? I genuinely don't know. Okay, so what's the resonance of that? If you can get those three categories down, then you use that as a compass for other things. Like, should I stay in this relationship? I don't know. Should I stay in this relationship? No. Ooh, that scares me. That came up really clearly. Why was that there? And then you notice the other parts of you that override the no and go, oh, but it's good for this reason and this reason and this reason. And you go through that loop for a while and just watch how it all plays out. It takes time, but it's fun to lean into it. It's fun to try to get clarity, even if it's kind of miserable.
Yeah. I mean, this attunement to inner wisdom is I think you're talking to the importance of treating it like an experimentation process. You know, where it's like, what if the goal was not to get it right, but just to see what happens? And I remember in the early days of learning to communicate with that deeper self, and use it as a guiding, essentially a compass in my life, I would do all kinds of things like go for a run and just see in my mind like what direction I should go, like at like a stop sign or something, or like, yeah, like open the fridge and like see what would like call to me, right? And kind of just like play with it. And I think that's I think a lot of people think that learning to tap into this and intuition needs to be like some serious, like all or nothing thing versus just like a progressive, low intensity experimentation, you know, to get comfort and build trust and all the things required to really start to have a deep communion with that inner guide.
Yeah, exactly. And if you don't do that process, then you're something's going to be motivating your actions, and that's the thing to look at. What is motivating my moment to moment way of relating with the world? And that's where I see the intersection between spirituality and living in the real world. That's what took a long time for me to come to that
Mm.
simplicity, where it's just this peace that I experience on the mat, in the cushion and meditation practice that I have in solitude, right? Like I want that. Like that, the resonance of that feels complete. It feels true. It feels like I'm me when I'm there. I feel free when I'm there. Well, what does it mean to have that resonance be the thing that like is the illuminating energy through all the decision points you have to make in your life? And then when you do that, then the decisions that you make support a world that allows you to exist more from that place rather than making decisions from
Mm.
fear, relationships from fear, which are going to create worlds that depend on you being more in that place. So it's really like precious in that way. And in Buddhism, they talk about this whole thing of like dependent origination, which is essentially like why we're caught on these patterns of like suffering. And it really holds the power of a single moment. Like how you relate in a single moment will condition the next moment, and then the next moment, and the next moment. So much of how we're conditioning our next moments are just out of fear, or I'm not safe, or I need to do a little bit more. If you do that, now you're creating the next moment off of that energy. If you pause in that moment and you stop and go like, I'm not going to give into that anymore. I'm just going to be. And then you wait for that soft pulse that's like, ah, this coffee. Watch what it's like to go for coffee from that place, and then watch like the next moment that unfolds from there, and pay attention to what it's like to do things in your life where you like override a certain knowing. I can almost guarantee you're going to see the consequences if you're paying close enough attention to your
Mm.
experience. So that's what I'm interested in. Like, how does that freedom get illuminated uh, through how we move and make decisions in life? And that's where you get like freedom in real life.
Yeah, there does also seem to be this intelligence that is kind of like progressively testing you. At least this is what it feels like for me, where it's like progressively testing you to trust even more. Like it's like
Mm.
pushing your edge to like get to
Yeah,
that next threshold of trust. And
so
and
true.
and it's really pretty cool because it can seem like a cramp on your style, right? Where you're like I mean, the number of times I've been in the middle of a work day and like gotten like a ping of that inner voice that I clearly recognize is coming from a deeper place to go do something else, and I'm like, oh, really? Like I'm like in the zone here, but the paradox of it is that the more and more you let that lead, the more and more light and free life becomes. And that's
Yeah.
actually it is like an intelligence to the like I'm gonna baby step you along this more and more and more and more and more until you can see that this is actually a path to freedom.
Yeah, it's like you're accumulating evidence along the way of like that you can let go and you can surrender in these small ways. and that it's not only that things don't fall apart, but you're like taken care of on a deep level, or certain things do actually fall away, but you see that they weren't in service to the place in you that you're trying to live from. And that takes often a lot of small moments over and over and over to really develop a bigger trust for some of the bigger things in life. But it does seem like there is this testing of you and pushing you. Like the classic examples are like people who I know so many people like this. They leave a job, so often in like corporate, because they want to explore something else. So they leave that job to try to start their own thing, and they're in this in between phase of starting it and feeling really open and good, and they don't totally know what's going to come yet, but there's like new energy in life. And then they get a job offer for something where like the salary is double and it's in a better location, and it just hits all of these ego check boxes where it's like, oh my, like how could you not take this? But and some of them give in, and that's fine. Like I totally get it. Those who don't though and stay with it, it's like it gives them even more energy in this other direction. There's something energetically to feeling those temptations and using it as an opportunity to double down on that place in you that you're now committed to living, that strengthens it and gives it new power. I don't know why. I don't really know how to describe it. But I've felt it ever since even like the early days of my meditation. I would see just
Mm.
letting go of a seductive thought, just like really want to think about that, and I would let it go, and it would like drop my concentration another layer deeper. Or I'd be working at these edges of cultivating equanimity, where I'd be in a warm shower and I just wanted to like cozy up in the shower rather than like maintaining my awareness. But I would just like let go of the part of me that just wanted to like collapse into the warmth of it, and just like hold that too as another passing experience, in the same way that I might hold pain as a passing experience. And so like letting go of pleasure, and then it would take me to a whole other level of equanimity and stability, and it would show me like there's even more pleasure here, but it's not the kind of pleasure you're looking for. There's more stability and equanimity and spaciousness and fulfillment. So I've I've had enough experiences now in all
Mm.
these different domains of when I let go of the thing that really is tempting, um, I'm given that and more in return.
Is that the paradox of letting go concept that you speak to in your 30-day program?
A bit. So the paradox of letting go is I always, once I started doing more letting go work, I realized that there is a semantic paradox to letting go, because it implies that you need to move away from something, but you often first need to move closer to the thing that you want
Mm.
to move away from, to be able to see what are the subconscious hooks in it. Why are you, if you're not able to let go of something, there's some part of you that still believes your life will be better by holding on to this thing. Even if that means like an identity you won't have to assume by being the person who doesn't have this thing anymore. Or like I can't let go of this relationship that I'm ruminating about. And it's just like, why? Like I want to move on. I want to start dating other people. But there's a fear like if I do truly let go, I'm going to have to feel the pain of being rejected from this person or not being with this person anymore. So there's all these subconscious things that if you're trying to let go just from the perspective of, I don't want this, get away from me,
Mm.
um, it's like having one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake. So you often have to move closer to the thing, like soften into it, be compassionate toward the part of you that is holding on. And that's where I say, like, if you want to let go, you first need to fall in love with the part of you that is holding on. And what that means is like you get close enough and accepting enough and loving enough to see what its fear is and letting go. And that fear will always reduce to something to do with love. Like, I'm going to lose love. I'm going to lose connection. I'm going to lose safety. So when you fall in love with it, when you just, and that just means like giving it total acceptance and warmth. When you do that, you're giving it the very nutriment it fears it will lose if it were to let go. And therefore, letting go just happens organically. So that's the paradox of letting go. And that's why so much letting go can happen in contemplative practice, where you're just bringing warmth and presence to your experience. But the thing with surrender is that maybe you're referring to as well, is that you get back all that you're willing to release. You will make space for life to come in to the extent that you're willing to let go of the things getting in the way of it. And those things that are getting in the way of it are often all of these ideas of what I need to have and who I need to be in order to get the safety and love. And all of that is a block to the recognition that you already are that. You already are that inherent safety and love. So if you're just willing, it's like the universe saying, if you're just willing to trust, just try trusting, letting go, like I will give it to you. But you don't even have to think of it in a mystical way. You don't have to think of this as some like universe sitting on a treetop, like taking care of you or not. It's kind of like just energetic realities that play with yourself. See the truth of them for yourself.
I think that's good advice. Yeah, I think, again, back to experimentation, right? You can take like progressive bets with this stuff and see what happens.
Yeah.
And it does feel like you, like with surrender specifically for me, I had an experience where basically my company had 3 failed M&A attempts, and then I finally realized that I was basically clinging to that happen. Like I was like, I need to sell the company. And like, it was like, that's what needs to happen. And I finally, it was like the night before we sold, we got sued. And that was like the last straw of like, Jesus Christ, like the universe just doesn't want me to sell this company. And the next day I finally like was like, F it. I fully let go. Like I like, whatever you want to do here, I really don't care anymore. And then funny enough, the whole situation shifted and we did end up selling the company 2 weeks later. And, you know, I think what that story points to and what we're talking about here is there almost is this like progressive teaching through life itself that is stepping us through progressive levels of it being okay, of like teaching, giving us the reference experiences that it's okay and it's safe and that you will be provided for. And I think the beautiful part about, look, a lot of those can be really painful. Like I lost a lot of money by that example that I just shared. But like, you know, the thing that's so amazing about the awareness practice and bringing it into every present moment is that you can kind of key into those things quickly, you know, more sooner before something catastrophic or, you know, really kind of like rattling actually happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Like the little bits of information that you're getting along the way that are often more like whispers before you get hit with the Mack truck.
Yeah, exactly.
Getting to, yeah. I think it's also just important for us to remind everyone also that like all this inner knowing is still being filtered through the reality of your life. So you might find like and the reality of the 3D world, which is that you still need to eat, you still need to have shelter, still need to like take care of your kids. And so sometimes when people like they're maybe in a difficult relationship and like super stressed out with their kids, and there's this thing that's coming forward that's like, I can't do this anymore. Sometimes they perceive that whisper as like, I got to blow everything up and I got to leave the marriage, I got to leave the kids, and I got to go like run a bar in Hawaii on a beach. And it like that's often just another part of the ego that's just like, there's a lot here, I don't want to be with it anymore, so like destroy it all. And you want to be careful with that. Like we don't always get like a direct message of what to do next. It often will just start as like a whisper of like, oh, something's not working here, but it doesn't mean you have to blow the entire thing up. That's where you like go a little slow and go like, all right, what's one step that this is asking me to have? And it might be like, I got to have a conversation with my partner. Like we're arguing too much. It doesn't feel good. And you follow that. So watch how the ego mind can hijack this and make all these big um, forecasts of like what needs to happen next. It doesn't know yet. The ego likes to work in linear direction, past, present, future. Intuitive wisdom works in like a vertical field, the fifth dimensional. So you just have these like arisings in a moment. So it's good to be patient with that process, and to also, yeah, remember, like if you don't have any money, if you're like at a place where you're like really working to take care of yourself, um, then it might not be the right thing to let go of your job just because something doesn't feel right yet.
Mm.
Then it might be like, I got to devote a little bit more time to working on this side thing to get it going. So this is where you want to go slow with these processes, because sometimes when you hear people talk about it like us, it can come across as like, if I just let everything go and I stop caring about my own needs, I'm going to be taken care of. And that is actually like, that's actually a disembodied state. You kind of go into fantasy land and you just like, everything is going to be good and okay. You want to stay in your body. You want to stay interacting with the 3D world, with the world around you, and like be filtering in the realities of what's in front of you right now. And given these realities, what feels like the next step.
Mm.
And that's how you move like hand in hand with the world that's in front of you and slowly allow it to reorganize itself around this pulse that's coming through.
I appreciate you pointing that out. And a thing that I've noticed that's coming up for me is I think also like, just like the examples that have been brought up about like the universe delivering us situations for us to face things, right? That get bigger and bigger and bigger until they hit us overhead. I also think it does that for realigning us to our highest intention.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if you have a nudge that you're supposed to go do some creative career, and now all of a sudden there's this component of listening to inner wisdom and like, oh, I'm afraid I'm going to miss it. And what happens if I miss it? It's like, what I've observed is that if you're for whatever reason meant to do something, like you're going to have more opportunities to receive that nudge and that alignment that's good, that's moving you into a positive direction. And I think
Yeah.
that oftentimes goes overlooked. And this experimentation with this just does not have to be a pressure filled process.
Yeah. Well said.
Nice, man. Well, I think we're coming to a close here. But man, I love talking about these topics with you. I really appreciate how you bring this wisdom and information in such a practical way that people can apply directly to their experience and see what happens. And then ultimately, I think, it would be cool if people listening to this, maybe just tried some of this out if they haven't already and see what happens. I also know you're creating a lot of really cool stuff that brings this information to people in a really digestible way so that they can apply it to their life. And yeah, would love to hear about that and what cool things you're coming out with so that anybody listening can explore those if they feel called to it.
Cool. Thanks, man. Yeah. I mean, for anyone who wants to follow along what I'm thinking about, Instagram is the best place. But the main program that I tell people to start with is just my 30-day starting fresh course. So anyone who's in a transition right now is like struggling to let go of something and is like curious about following this more subtle pulse that we're talking about, that course is the place to start. We've had a lot of people go through that now, going through the same process. So it's very digestible. So that's what I'd recommend if you're interested to go deeper, and that you can find that on my Instagram profile.
Nice. And I'll link it to this as well. And yeah, I also want to just give you props on the form factor of that. I think like a month long intensive, short digestible things is like a really cool delivery mechanism, for this type of thing. And we're coming up on a new year, so what a great opportunity to check something like that out.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Really nice talking to you.
Likewise, brother. Great talking to you, and thank you everybody for listening. We'll link those resources out to make it easy for you. And man, keep on spreading the light, man. It's really awesome.
Likewise, brother.